Okay, I think we're about ready to get started. Before I start, I want to mention a few things. First of all, we will be recording this talk, so don't worry about having to take any notes or do your own recording. It will be posted on YouTube in the next 48 hours, so that is taken care of. If you have any questions, it looks like some of you have already discovered the chat box. You can ask any of your questions there, and Yusta will be in charge of collecting the questions and also maybe answering some quick ones that she can answer right in the channel while I'm talking. And then we'll get to the rest of the questions at the end. If we don't get to your question during the Q&A part at the end of the chat, don't worry. I will post a slide that shows you how to get in contact with us, to get in contact with the entire Rasa community, or also Rasa, us, the company, about your interests. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. Okay, welcome everyone to how to develop your own AI assistant in healthcare. Quick outline of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to do a 5-minute introduction into why we think that healthcare is a good use case for AI assistants, talk about what AI assistants can bring to healthcare and why Rasa is specifically a good platform for doing this. And then I'm going to jump into some code with our Medicare Locator, which is a example bot that we published on GitHub. And I'll go into that and be able to show you all the different parts of what makes a Rasa bot and what makes it work, and how to build upon what we already have to start creating your bot. Then at the end, hopefully we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes for you to ask me any of the questions you have, and I can get back to you and help clear things up. So to start off, just the question of what can conversational AI do for healthcare? We think that the most important thing that AI assistants can bring to healthcare is the automation of administration, because over the last few years, the amount of administration in healthcare has been growing and growing, and the cost of supporting that administration has also been growing, even if the actual cost of physicians and treatment and things like that haven't. And a lot of this administration is actually small things that are repetitive and could definitely be automated. And we think that AI assistants are a really good way to take all of those resources that are currently being put toward administration and being able to put them toward the really important things, like treating people and making sure people are healthy and stay healthy. So here are just a few possible use cases. An AI assistant in healthcare, and by a few, I mean 20. 8 of these have already been implemented by some companies that are working with us. So some of them seem pretty obvious, or maybe are already automated in other ways. For example, being able to go online and change your contact details for your health insurance, or answering frequently asked questions via a website that has links to all these answers. What we think conversational AI can really bring to these is not only the automation of these processes, but actually the personalized user experience. So instead of just going on a website and having to log into a portal and click around and find the place to change your contact details, it's more of an experience of talking to an assistant who asks you these questions and gets the information out of you naturally, and it feels like a lot smoother of an experience. What is also really helpful about Rasa specifically, and just open source software for healthcare and for AI assistants, is that open source software is special in that it's all, like, our platform is downloadable and you can run everything in your own servers or in your own private cloud. And what this does is it allows you to be able to create HIPAA compliant bots because you don't have to send your protected health information to Rasa. We don't get any of it, so you don't have to like share all of this protected data with us. You can maintain your data privacy and security. And this is one of our most important things. This part of our mission is that we want to enable all makers to create AI assistants that work for everyone. And we want to make sure that everyone has access to the best conversational AI without having to sacrifice things like data privacy. And in addition, the open source software is customizable, which means that you can make use of not only what we offer, but also any other open source things you can find online. So for example, when it comes to natural language understanding, there are specific word embeddings that are trained on medical documents and medical terms, and you can start with those to automatically have really good entity recognition for medical terms that might not be something that you find in a regular corporate hosted chatbot software. And you can connect it with any of your channels. So if your company, for example, talks to users in an app that you host, or if you want to have a widget on your website, you can do all of these things and connect. And if you find something that you want your bot to do that our software doesn't currently support, you can just implement it yourself because everything's under Apache 2. And if you're interested in contributing back to open source software, you can even open source your changes and put them into the Rasa. You can contribute on the Rasa GitHub and actually make that available for everybody, which is a really cool, interesting thing. So to be able to hopefully inspire some of you guys to jump on this like healthcare bandwagon, we wanted to create a way to make it easy for you to start building your first healthcare bot. So we created an example bot called the Medicare Locator that's live on our GitHub right now. And what it is it's a really simple use case that features all the things that Rasa bots can do. So the Rasa stack supports language understanding and dialogue management, which are our two main things. But also you can connect bots to third-party APIs for chat purposes. So today I'll show you a bot that is launched on Telegram, and you can also connect it to any other output channel. And then you can also connect it to third-party APIs in order to get data and do other actions and actually have an impact on the outside world that's not just within your little chat bubble with your AI assistant. So let's go to the GitHub. One second. Okay, sorry. Here is the Medicare Locator. So it's on our GitHub at Rasa HQ. And what it has is it's got all of your data that you need to form a completely functioning healthcare bot that runs on a separate channel. And it's got a really good introduction and instructions for how to install and set it up, run it, and launch it on the channel. I won't get into that today because I want to show you the actual meat of how it works, but it's really easy to follow and hopefully it'll be easy for you guys too. So the first things first, let's show you what this bot does. So here I am on Telegram, and I really like Telegram as a platform because it's super easy to create a bot and then it's available for everybody to check it out if you just search for the username of the bot. So I added a little description that tells you what it does. Our Medicare bot helps people find nursing homes, home health agencies, or hospitals in any US city, those that support Medicare, hence Medicare Locator. So I'm going to talk to the bot and say hello. And of course, something, oh, there we go. So he's going to offer me these different options of what I'm going to look for. So I'm going to say I'm looking for a nursing home, and I am located in my hometown of Toledo. And then it's going to offer me some nursing homes. So naturally, you can that this has to have some sort of database to pull these from. It's actually pulling from an on. So once I pick one, it goes faster than this. Of course, it's going. There we go. And it's going to give me the address, and I'll say thanks. And one of the other things that our bot can do, because we know that people love to chat to bots and they love to try to figure out the limits and what it can handle, is that we have a little bit of chit chat involved in our bot, so that if someone interrupts by saying something like, oh, what's the weather like? It will respond with something fun. And so that's just the nice, pretty front end of talking to this bot. And so now I will actually show you the code and how we get into it. All right, are we seeing the screen? Yes, perfect. Okay. So what I've started out at is the stories. So you can see over here on the left all of the different files that encompass a bot. And right now I'm in data, and we have two types of data: the core data, which is the stories, which train the dialogue management, and the NLU data, which trains the actual NLU, natural language understanding. So the reason I started with the stories is because you can kind of see how they reflect the conversation that I just had with the bot. So for example, this is basically the path that I took. So I said hello, and then the bot told me different facility types that I could choose from. I picked a facility type. I'll tell you what this means later and why it's. Then the bot started this form, and basically what the form is business logic that says, okay, I need to collect these pieces of information before I execute this action. So to ask where I've been located, because it needed to know both my location and what type of facility I was looking for before it could go to the API and pull facilities. And so it did that, and then I chose a facility, it found the address, it uttered it for me, and then I said thanks, and then it said no worries. And so how to know what all of these different things mean. So what is utter no worries, and why is this greet? You can check out the domain file. The domain file basically tells you all of the different things that your bot can do or handle. So for example, up here in the intents, you can see some of the ones I used, like greet and inform. And that was when I told it about, you know, which facility I wanted to choose. It also has a bunch of different intents for our chit chat skill. So these are all the things that it can answer if I ask it to book a restaurant for me or something like that. It won't actually book a restaurant, but it will answer. Similarly, the utter templates are all of the things that my bot can just say, and it does that in response to something that I've said as a user. And then we have actions, which include all these utterances, but also a few other actions. So like action chit chat and find facility types, find healthcare address. These are custom actions, which are actions that we've written in our own Python code. And those actions can do basically anything. So I will get back to those in a bit. And then also you have entities, which are picked up by the NLU, and then slots are ways to save the context of the story, which is really important in a contextual assistant. For example, like if you ask for a hospital in Toledo, and then you decide, actually, can you show me nursing homes? The bot should know that you're in Toledo. And that's how it does this, is that it saves it in the location slot so that when it calls the facility action, it already knows where you are and doesn't have to ask again. So these are all sorts of different happy paths that you can take. And happy paths are basically ways we want to interact with the bot. So for example, the one I just took, or there's also a multi-request happy path like I was talking about, where you can ask for one sort of facility and it'll give you the address. And then you want to ask for a different type of facility and it'll give you another address. But there are also different ways you can stray from the happy path, especially if we include chit chat, which is one of our skills. So we have a whole nother file of stories here where we basically say, okay, if the user says any of these chit chat intents, then we want to respond with our custom action chit chat, which basically just chooses the correct utterance and utters it. But we throw it into different parts of the story to make sure that no matter when someone interrupts with chit chat, we can handle that and we can actually know what to do next. And it's not only that we are only paying attention to the intent, we're actually paying attention to the whole context of the conversation. So for example, if you ask for, or if you utter chit chat once in this bot, it will just answer you and then it will go back to what it was doing. So it won't bother you. It'll just say, okay, I have this goal I'm trying to achieve and I'm going to keep going. But if you interrupt twice, actually come and ask you if you want to continue, because it realizes that you're kind of going off track. And then you can either decide to say yes and it'll keep going, or you can say no, and then it will close out the form and say goodbye. And so I figured I would show you how this works by also showing you what the bot looks like running in the command line. So let's pull up our bot here. I'll make this a little bigger. So I say hi. And when I am here, I don't have buttons, so I just put the actual intent here. And if I say, instead of actually providing the city name like it wants me to, I'll say, tell me a joke. And then it will give me a joke, and then it will say, okay, I want to keep going. I want to help you. And so I'll say, what's the weather? And now, like I said, it knows that you're sort of going on topic, and it says, do you want to keep going? And I'm going to say no. And so this sort of interruption and handling different types of interruptions and different numbers of interruptions can be really helpful, not only for exiting out of forms or certain pieces of logic that you're trying to do. It can also be helpful for example, handing off to a human if a person is confused for too long or things like that. It's a way to have a sort of escape route from your story. If the user decides that they don't want to go down the happy path, you want to be able to handle anything. And so now I want to talk about how the bot actually knows which action to take. So basically what happens is these stories are training data. So they tell the bot, or upon training, you have all of these different paths that you can take. And what it does is you have a configuration file that has these different policies, and they work together so that every time you put a new intent in, then the bot is going to predict actions, and each policy is going to predict different distributions of probabilities for the actions, and then it's going to pick whichever one has the highest probability from any of the policies. And so some of the more deterministic stuff that you were seeing where I was following the path that I had already written are taken care of by the memoization policy, which basically just, it basically memorizes all of the stories that you have. And then this max history tells it, okay, if the last 6 events are things that I've seen and I know what comes next, then I'm just going to predict the action that comes next after those 6 actions. But what the Keras policy is here for is if I don't actually know what comes next, then I want to make an educated guess. So that's where the machine learning comes in. And the Keras policy is trained over all of your stories to kind of create these weights that are going to help you predict what is the most likely next action if you don't actually know, if you've never seen this context before. And then the form policy is there for, like I was saying, the business logic of the facility form saying, until I have the information I need, I don't want to predict anything else. I want to keep asking for the information so that I can execute the action at the end. Okay. And then when it comes to these intents that I mentioned, the actual prediction of these intents and classification is also machine learning. So there has to be a way for the data of what you actually say to get to these intents. So in our NLU data, we have examples for each of the intents. So for example, here, affirm, deny, goodbye, etc. The most important ones are the ones that are really going to pick to lead our story. So for example, here with search provider, there was actually a story that started with search provider where instead of me saying hello, I could just completely jump right in and say, I need a home health agency, my zip code is 43606, and it would start doing that. And in addition to the entity or the intent classification, the natural language understanding also takes care of entity recognition, which is what this parentheses and brackets are doing here. So essentially, in my NLU data, anything that's in brackets is an entity, and that's the value of the entity. And then this is the name of the entity. So for example, all of these zip codes and then the cities here, like Nashville, they're all locations. So we want to pick up that entity so that we can use it. And we want to store it in a slot so that we can use it later. And then we also have, for example, facility types. And the reason that these look like these is because we are actually using synonyms to map each facility type, for example, hospital, to the way that it's written in the API for calling custom action, or for calling the database where we're going to get this information. So here we have all the endpoints for different types of facilities. So each facility type has a name that we've mapped to it, and each one also has an endpoint because each database is a little different. So to get all that information, we have to change it up a little bit. And what these custom actions do is that they're going to do the meat of the interesting things that our bot can do, because our bot can say things and that's fine, but we want our bot to actually be able to change things in the outside world and, you know, be able to do things like make appointments and, you know, call people and all these things. A custom action can essentially do anything. So for example, the find healthcare address is one of the ones that's going to check out the API from Medicare.gov. So what it does is once it has the facility type, which is like hospital or things like that, and it's also gotten the facility ID from the form action below, then it creates a path to make an API request right here, makes a GET request to a database, which is going to return a list of, for example, hospitals that fit all of your requirements. So fit that you're in this city. And then what it will do is it'll return the address like here, and then it will set the slot. So these are what each custom action returns is a list of events. So slot set is an event, and that event can affect the story if you want it to, or it cannot affect the story. So for example, slot set is something that will affect the story if your slots are what we call, or if your slots are not unfeaturized. So all of our slots are unfeaturized, so we don't have to worry about set affecting our stories. And the reason we want that is because no matter what facility address we're setting, or no matter what location we're in, the action we're doing is the same. We still want to call this database and find the facilities in that area. Oops, we went back to the top. Okay. Right. And then down here we have a form action, which is similar. It's like a subclass of an action, and it's got some special methods that you have to give. So for example, it has required slots. So like I mentioned, facility type and location, and it's got slot mapping. So it knows how to pick up these entities from the input that you give it. So if it picks up the entity facility type and it knows that you're trying to inform it, then it will set that slot. And then once it submits, we do another request and get the request is hidden in find facilities, but then we get all of these results, and then we utter the button messages depending on the results. So, you know, if there are no results, then we don't put out any buttons. We say, sorry, we couldn't find anything, but then we also have ways to utter different numbers of buttons. And then down here we have our action chit chat, which is basically just a very simple action that says, okay, if any of these intents come up, which are my chit chat intents, all I want to do is I want to utter the template that matches it. And so in my domain file, I have a template for each of the actions, or for each of the intents here. And then one more thing before I get into extending this, I didn't talk about the Nlu Config yet. So basically, this is similar to the core configuration in that it's when you train your NLU, it goes through all these different components in your pipeline. And there are tons of different ways to customize an NLU configuration. For example, this one starts with Spacey. And so Spacey is a really good way to have pre-trained word embeddings. So you don't have to build them up from scratch. There's a lot of entities that Spacey already supports that it will pick up, hopefully, naturally. And we also have a regex intent feature, or entity featureizer, because at the bottom of our NLU data, we actually have a regex that tells then we're going to tag it as a location, because the way that this bot is currently running, that's the only thing that it should be. If we were to implement, say, something about policy numbers, and they also, you know, your health insurance policy was 5 numbers long, then you would want to change this. So you kind of have to keep an eye on how you're pulling things out as you start adding different actions and different skills to your bot. But similarly to the regex, we have synonyms, which is how we were mapping different facility type names to their actual API codes. And then we have entity recognition from Rasa, which is the NAIR CRF. It's a conditional random field for picking out intents. Then we also have a scikit-learn intent classifier. So that's what's going to take in all this stuff and like decide what intent it is. And that's the most important, because it's going to figure out where our bot is going to go next, because that intent is going to be fed into the core policies. Yeah. So what I want to show you next is how to add on to this bot. So I'm sure that you're already thinking that there's so much more that this bot could do than just look up addresses and give them to you. And so when you want to add things to the bot, there's always a billion things. And what I would recommend is starting with something that you know people are going to want, and think about what is the simplest, most general way that I can please everyone to start with. And then I can, after I figure that out, then I can move to doing things more specifically. And this is also convenient because I don't have that much time, and I want to do something that is quick, but also going to help you do a new skill, add to your bot, and then start building out from there. So what I think when I see this bot is that anybody who is looking for you know, a hospital or a nursing home in their area might also be wanting to make an appointment there or call and ask for more information about a nursing home, etc. And what I noticed when I was in the API, I don't know where it is, there it is. So when you're creating these, this is the database that I was actually pulling the information from. So this is, for example, the hospital information. It's got these fields, and we were pulling some of them. We were pulling the address, the city, the state, etc. But there's a phone number in here that we just don't use, which would be great to have in our bot so that we can tell people kind of what to do next if they ask. And so I think of a few different ways people could ask to get a phone number because, for example, for right now, we can implement one skill to help both people who are looking to make an appointment and both people who are looking to get more information. So I'm going to call that intent contact. And that means somebody is trying to contact the bot, or sorry, somebody is trying to contact the facility because they want to keep going with this. They want to, you know, ask for an appointment or more information. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the intent to my domain file because everything has to go in here. And then I'm just going to add a few examples to my NLU data. So I can add it in anywhere. And I want to cover my different bases. So for example, a few examples about phone numbers, if they just specifically ask for the phone number, or how can I call them, or can you give me the phone number? But this should also work for people who are saying, I want to book an appointment, or how do I book an appointment, or how can I get in contact, etc. And you can fill these in your own, or you can use different tools like Chatito, which kind of takes your intent data and fleshes it out a little bit to give you more more examples for your intents, because for each intent you have, the more examples, the better, because it'll help your NLU generalize better and pick up better those user messages that aren't exactly like what you have in here. But what's really good is that we can also add the NLU data while we're talking to the bot when we use interactive. So once we have the NLU data in here, we have to think about what the bot is going to do, how the bot is going to respond to that. And so what I'm thinking is that I just want to offer this information if I have it. So for example, I'll do a similar thing with utter address, but instead I will utter phone number. And then I will say something like, to schedule an appointment or get more information, call, and then phone number, similar to the utter address above. But now that I have this, I need a place to store that phone number. So what I'm going to do is create a new slot, similar to my facility address up here, phone number. And then I'm going to make that one also unfeaturized, because no matter what phone number I get from the API, I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm going to utter it. And then I have to make sure that I add my utterance to my actions so that bot knows what to do. Okay, so I've changed my NLU data and I've changed my domain, which means I need to train both of my models. So I'm going to train NLU. One second, make this bigger. And this is going to go through the whole process of training my configuration and picking new weights for everything so that it can, as best as possible, pick the right intents. So it's got these components that it's training, as you can see. It's almost done. And then while I train the core model, that's going to take a little while longer because of the amount of epochs on our Keras policy, we can actually implement the action of doing this. So there are two different ways that you could do something like this, because we're trying to retrieve more information. If we wanted to, we could create an action in itself that retrieves this information and then calls the utterance template. But what you'll notice is that we've actually already gone through the process of retrieving the entire row of the data set for that facility ID. So we have the phone number information already, and that happens here in the Find Healthcare Address section. So what we can do is we have the full results here, and selected is the first, which is, there's only one because we looked up the facility ID, but this is where we get all the information for the address. So for what we can do is actually add, we want to take care of the phone number. So the phone number is going to be the same one, but we're going to get phone number. And like in here, they're actually a little differently named for each one, but luckily I looked them up in the database before. So similar to up here, this is actually provider phone number. And then here, and this one's just phone. And so now we have that information, and all we need to do now is make sure that it gets actually into our slot so that we can use it in our utterance template. So in the same way that we utter the facility address here, we're going to, or sorry, not utter, we're going to set the facility address slot. We're going to set the phone number slot to phone number. And then we also want to take care of what happens if for some reason it can't be found. So we're going to do the same thing we do over there, and we're going to say not found. So then at least something will output if for some reason there is no phone number. And now that I've changed my actions.py file, this is my action server, which runs all of my actions on a separate server from my Rasa core server. So I just need to stop that and then make the action server again. And now everything should be ready. If you notice, I haven't updated my stories at all. But what's really cool about Rasa is that you can actually start implementing your new actions by running the interactive learning mode. So if I make interactive, what it's going to do is it's going to take my conversation step by step, and it's going to ask me every intent, every entity, every action. It's going to confirm that I want to do that. And this is a really good way to implement new skills to, if you've added a new intent, things like that. It's great to go in here, because what happens is that we do all this confirmation, and then at the end we can actually export all of the data so that you have new NLU data, new story data, and a domain that matches everything, which is great. So I'm going to pretty much say whatever I want, because even if the bot screws up, then I can fix it, which is really nice about interactive learning, because the bot is learning as you're going. So I know Haya, I don't think actually is going to get checked out. I use Haya all the time, but apparently bots don't like it, because I have hit that road many times before. So no, it does not inform. What it does is it asks me what it was. It was actually greet, which it predicted with 0.01% confidence, probably because it thinks this place is a location, but it's not. So I'm going to take away the entity notation and say, no, all I wanted to do was say Haya. So now it says I want to run find facility types. Yep, that sounds right. And then action listen, that just means it's going to listen for my input. So I'm going to inform. Now it's going to try to do this. It's perfect. So now it's going to ask me what my city is. And if I want to, I can be fun and try to sneak out of the form by chit-chatting something. So I'll say something like, I don't know, what's one I haven't used yet? Let's do something fun. Where are you from? Ask where from. Yes. So in this case, the bot wants to run facility form, but that's not what we want it to do because we want it to answer us first. So we're going to tell it to chit chat. And then here, now it's answered us. I was born in the coolest city on earth, which is Berlin, by the way. And then it's going to run the form, which is correct. And now it's asking me again for my zip code. So I'll give it a zip code. It's going to figure it out correctly. And now once it runs the form, it's going to listen to me. Oops. So find the address, utter address, perfect. And so now I could say thank you, or I could ask for the number now. I'm just going to say thanks. And then at this point, I'm going to say, like, what's the phone number? So it knows that I want to contact. And now it wants to run action chit chat, which is false. That's not what we want it to do, but we can't expect it to do any better because we haven't ever given it this context. It's never seen this action before. So I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to say, where is it? Utter phone number here. And here, it uttered the phone number for me. So now I'm going to end it. And what I can do is I can export and quit. And then I just give it the paths to my files. And this one is NLU data and the domain. And then what it does is it writes my files. And so if you'll notice, it's added this new story that we just had. And if I go to the NLU data, it'll actually add, I think it's reorganized my data in here, but the things that I said in here and verified the intents from, it will actually add those to my intent data. So that's a really good way to train your bot and make sure that all of the information it's getting is foolproof because you told it every step of the way what to do. Yeah, so that's just how to start building on your bot. Just start small and kind of keep going and see what you can do. Yeah. So now I will take some questions. Well, I guess I'll stay on here because this is probably the best way to do it. Okay, so I will start with Ayush's first question, which is, can we make our bot take attachments and use it according to our logic? So it depends really on what you want to do with your attachment. In general, what comes back to the bot is actually whatever is in the user message. So for example, if you give it an attachment, it depends on how your channel is going to receive that attachment. So if your channel just turns it into a link, then you can get that link and sure, you can do things with it. Depends on what you want to do. You could send it back, you could send it to someone else or open it somewhere. But if you want it to, I mean, you can create your own logic to do whatever with it, but then also if you want it to affect the logic of your stories, then you would want to store that in a slot and make it a featureized slot so that you can write in your stories that, oh, if the slot was set by this link, then I want to do this. And that logic could also go into a custom action. Ayush also asks, can we put buttons inside the form questions? So what happens is that if you have a form action, then it can do a bunch of different things actually. So what it does by default is it finds these required slots and then it utters utter facility type and utter location. And these are utterances that you define in your domain file. So what you can do is actually include buttons in your domain file. They're really easy to include and they're well documented in our documentation. But so, for example, where's utter location? Oopsies. oh, sorry, utter ask location, my bad. So you could turn one of these utterances into an actual question with buttons that people can answer. And then when you do that, you can put the intents right into your button payloads, which is how we recommend using buttons. And then in your form action, these slot mappings tell you how to pick them up. And so right now it's being picked up from entity, but you can also pick them up from intent. So what you would do is just attach intents to the payloads, and then you would pick it up from the intent, and then you can set the value. So if the intent is affirm, then value equals true or yes, etc. So you can definitely put buttons inside the forms. You can also use forms to utter buttons in your submit message. That's actually what ours does here. So it puts all the payloads on our buttons, and then it utters button message down here. Okay, I hope I don't botch this name, but Jedrek asks, how do you deal with people misspelling words? This is a really common question that we have, is that, you know, how does word misspelling, especially with entities, screw things up? So with your regular NLU data with intent recognition, misspellings aren't actually that much of an issue, because like it's going to find things that are really close by. And what you also can do is actually include misspellings in your synonyms. I think we might have actually done that by accident here, but you can notice that we have home health agency with no Y, and sort of just put some of those synonyms in here, and then up in the stories, home health agency with no Y is still tagged as a facility. So even though it's an entity that's misspelled, it gets picked up. There are also a lot of spell check components. We don't offer one, or we don't support one out of the box at Rasa, but one of the great things about the customization is that you can use any components that you find, or use custom code from other people to create your own components. And Spellcheck is just one of the things that you can do. So you could, you know, go through the words depending on the perplexity of the next word and say, okay, this really doesn't look like the right word, check it against other words and maybe fix it. And you can have a custom component that does that, which is really cool. Oh, whoa. Okay, sorry, I'm just seeing a lot of questions. Okay, Johannes LaRue asks, don't you feel that the domain files get big and messy? This is if you have, you know, a bot that has lots of actions. Says, I like that I can have different action scripts per integration, but I don't think you can split the domain file. This is actually something that we're aware of. We also have a big bot, and I agree. I think that the domain file has gotten really big and kind of hard to read. And so we're actually looking into, I mean, we're constantly looking into ways to improve our bots and the user experience of using our bots. And we're hoping to implement ways to either merge domains or have kind of domains that handle separate actions, so, or separate skills. So for example, I might have a domain file that's going to handle all of my, all of the happy path stuff, and then have a separate domain file that handles the chit chat, to kind of keep that stuff separate so that it doesn't get all mixed up. So those are just some, you know, things that we're looking toward in the future. And when you have comments like these, they're actually really helpful things you can bring up on our forum and tell us, you know, what you're interested in as features, because we want to know what you guys want and what would make it easier for you. Okay. So Hadrian says, we need to provide appointment booking and triage questionnaires. Should it be a single bot or two specific bots that we orchestrate somehow? I would definitely pick just one bot, because orchestrating two bots is much more effort than it's worth, because if you have two very separate, very business logic-y skills like making an appointment booking and doing a questionnaire, those are really good advocates for form actions, because when you have a booking, you absolutely have a certain amount of information, certain required slots that you need to fill in order to execute that booking. And the same thing with questionnaires. You have these questions that you want to ask people, and you want to get their responses to everything before you submit it. And you can keep those separate really easily. And the nice thing about form actions is that if they don't have featurized slots within them, when you make the stories, you don't actually have to put a lot of the stuff in there. So for example, our interactive learning one has all this stuff about setting the slots here, but you'll notice that the only slots we have to set are when we start the form and when we end the form. So all of the informs that come in the middle about answering those requested slots, they can just go away. So you could say, if this is where your questionnaire form happens, then here's where your booking form happens. And then you can have a story where they're swapped because the person wanted to do another one first instead. So I think it would be pretty easy to put those in there for, put those in the same bot. Ahmed asks, is there a way to access the code or a repository with similar examples? There absolutely is. So the code that I'm looking at comes straight from our Medicare Locator. So this is just, if you go to the GitHub, this is the Rasa GitHub, and Just is going to send the link actually into the chat. This is where you can see all of our repositories. So we have the Medicare Locator right here, which is an example bot. Our demo bot is also an example bot. It's the demo bot that we use on our docs to let you ask questions about Rasa and things like that. So that's a more complicated example if you're looking for all the sorts of different things that you can do. There are also example bots within our repository. So this is like our actual code. If you go to examples here, we have bots that stay updated to the code that you can run using our commands in there, which are a really good way to start out. Okay, wait, no, sorry, I did that one. Ayush asks, what do I need to do for speech recognition? Should that be separately implemented in my bot's platform? So that would definitely be a sort of custom NLU process. So it really depends on what you want to do with your speech recognition. So there are different types of speech recognition. There's just speech to text, which takes, you know, the WAV files and turns them into text. And then you could send that text directly to Rasa to still extract entities and classify an intent. But if you want to actually go in and use speech recognition to create or to extract those intents via speech instead of text and entities, then what you would want to do is create your own kind of server that handles all of the pre-processing of this data from speech to that featurized vector that's going to output the probabilities of the different intents and also any entities that were picked up, and that's what you would send to Rasa Core. Oh, okay. Eugene Lin asked what the tool I mentioned on generating intents was. I think it's best used for entities, but I'm going to send it. Sorry? Mm-hmm. Oh, you did that? Sorry. Ah, sorry. Okay. Autofill questions. So Yedrek asks, is it possible to do autofilled questions? The patient starts typing and the bot offers suggested autofilled questions. That is something that's dependent upon the output channel for sure. So for just a completely different example, there are different sorts of output that you can support depending on your output channel. So if you're running your bot in Slack, then you can do a drop-down menu. But if you're in Facebook, then it might not have a drop-down menu. So if your custom output channel supports autofill, which is probably a sort of different type of API call, because you would have to send the user message one letter at a time and then pull the suggested text from Rasa. So that would definitely be an interesting project. It would probably take a lot of customizing. That would be really cool. Okay. Yes, Rasa is constantly being updated, but sometimes the newer versions of Core SDK, and others don't match with other versions, existing versions of NLU and Core. How do I know a compatible group? That's a good question. So our SDK on its GitHub actually has a chart that tells you which versions of SDK are compatible with Core. We are aware that there is a warning that throws sometimes with the newest versions that say that your SDK version, if it's 0.13.1, for example, isn't compatible, even when it should be. So we have a little bit of cleanup work to do. But yes. Okay. Sadly, that is all of the time we have. I know you guys have lots of questions, but these are really interesting questions and things that especially our community might want to hear about and might want to comment on. And if you join our community, then you can talk to other people about your questions and the things that you want to implement with Rasa and all of that. So if you want to learn more about Rasa and how it works, a good way to start is by going to our docs. So rasa.com/docs. And that has a huge amount of documentation on both Rasa NLU and Rasa Core. It can teach you how it works, how to implement things, all of it. We also have a blog where there's lots of input of various types. So input about how to customize things. There was just a 3-part customizing your NLU blog post, but there's also posts about like AI in general, conversationally AI, where we think it's going, and our research and all of that. So there's lots of stuff online for learning more. And of course, our GitHub, if you check out the actual source code. Another thing to mention, we're hiring. We have lots of positions open here in Berlin, and also a few starting in San Francisco. So we're always looking for new people, and community members are perfect for that. So just check out our careers page on our website, which is just rasa.com. And then, yeah, the last thing is getting in touch with us. So if you still have questions, which I'm sure there are lots of them, as I mentioned, you can go to our forum, which is forum.rasa.com. And there we have lots of community members online answering questions, helping each other out. There's also the Rasa employees are going in and helping people out with their questions and things like that. So if you have any questions on usage or just how to implement your bot, that's the place to go. And if you have questions about Rasa the company, or maybe you're interested in building like a business relationship between your business and Rasa, then send us an email at hi@rasa.com. And that will set you up to talk to somebody here about what you want to do with Rasa and how you want to work together. And the last thing I have to say is that we are hosting a big developer summit in San Francisco on September 24th. And signups for that are open right now. So you can go online and come meet us in San Francisco, and we'll have a great time. And you'll hear from companies and community members, people doing really cool projects with Rasa, and yeah, it'll be a great time. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.